You have a coin in your pocket. Look at it for 1 second. Now imagine a country that could defend itself with less than that. No standing army. No fighter jets. No tanks. Just police officers and a promise from a much bigger neighbor. Sounds like a country that would get swallowed up in a week, right? But it's still there. Still independent. Still free. And on the other side of the planet, another country has over 2 million people in uniform. More soldiers than the entire population of some nations. So here's the question that's going to break your brain today. Why does the country with almost no army sleep just as safely as the one with 2 million soldiers? We grow up thinking bigger army equals safer country. More soldiers, more tanks, more missiles, less to fear. That math feels obvious. It's also wrong. Today you're going to see the smallest military footprint on Earth and the largest active army on Earth side by side. And by the end, you'll understand why one number never tells the whole story. Development, the small side. Let's start small. Really small. Iceland has no standing army. None. 0 tanks. 0 fighter jets. 0 warships built for combat. What they do have is a coast guard and a small unit that handles crisis response and international peacekeeping. That's it. That's the whole military. For context, a standing army just means a permanent, full-time fighting force a country keeps ready at all times. Iceland skipped that entirely. How does that even work? 3 reasons. First, geography. Iceland is an island in the middle of the North Atlantic. No land borders. No neighbor who can just roll tanks across a line on a map. Second, alliances. Iceland is a founding member of NATO. That's a military alliance where an attack on one member is treated as an attack on all of them. So Iceland doesn't need its own army, because in theory, the militaries of dozens of other countries stand behind it. Third, size. Iceland has around 400,000 people. Building a full military from that population would drain the country's economy for a defense it may never even need to use. So instead, Iceland spends that money on healthcare, education, infrastructure. A calculated bet, geography plus alliances can replace tanks. Now let's go to the other extreme. China's People's Liberation Army is the largest active military force in the world, with over 2 million active duty personnel. 2 million people whose full-time job is military service. Add reserves, and the number climbs even higher. That's more people than the entire population of several small countries, just in uniform, just on active duty. Why does a country need that many? Land borders, for one. China shares borders with over a dozen countries. That's over a dozen different lines on a map that need to be monitored, defended, patrolled. Population, for another. With over 1 billion people, even a small percentage in military service becomes a massive absolute number. And geopolitical weight. A large standing army is also a signal to rivals, to allies, to the rest of the world, of a country's capacity to project power far beyond its own borders. So on paper, this looks like the total opposite of Iceland. 0 versus 2 million. No army versus the world's largest army. Here's where your brain has to flip the switch. Raw numbers of soldiers don't equal safety. They equal capacity. Capacity for what is the real question. 2 million soldiers matters if you're defending thousands of miles of land border, managing internal stability across a massive territory, and asserting influence across an entire region. 0 standing soldiers works if your geography already does half the defending for you, and your alliances cover the rest. Put Iceland's population inside China's borders, surrounded by more than a dozen countries, and the 0 army strategy collapses immediately. Put China's population on a remote island with 1 ocean between it and any land border, and 2 million active soldiers becomes overkill nobody needs. The size of a military isn't a measure of how safe a country is. It's a measure of how much geography, alliances, and geopolitics that country has to cover on its own. Goliath isn't stronger than David because Goliath is big. Goliath is big because Goliath has more ground to cover. This isn't just trivia about 2 countries far away. Every day, world leaders make the exact same calculation you just walked through. Small nations join alliances instead of building armies, betting that shared defense is cheaper and safer than going it alone. Large nations keep massive militaries not necessarily because they want war, but because covering their own size and borders leaves them no other option. Next time you see a headline comparing military size between 2 countries, ask the real question. Not, who has more soldiers? But how much do they actually have to defend, and who's defending it with them? You still have that coin in your pocket. Some countries defend themselves with less than that. Others need 2 million people in uniform to cover what they've got. Both can sleep safely tonight. Because in the end, safety was never about the size of the army. It was always about the size of the problem it has to solve.